Good afternoon, everyone. Now we are going to speak about the influence of auction system on the development of the renewable energy market. Our guests are Oleksandra Humeniuk, Deputy Director, European Energy Agency, Magnus Lundin, Head of the Council of the European-Ukrainian Energy Agency, Director at Celynx NG, Magnus Johansen, expert on renewable energy, Development Director for Ukraine at Scatec Solar. Good afternoon. We are a European-Ukrainian Energy Agency. I'm Oleksandra Humeniuk, the director. So the main is for us is the support of energy reforms in Ukraine and the support of the implementation of the European Union concerning the changes in energy sector, and also implementation of the requirements of energy community. I would like to say that first of all, European and Ukrainian Energy Agency is an independent, non-political organization, non-profit organization, and it is open for all participants of the market in the energy sector and energy efficiency and renewable energy for all the companies who want to have dialogue and to communicate with other stakeholders. I'm saying this in order to stress that now the expert opinion that will be expressed here is independent, and it will be based on professionalism of our speakers who are here with us today. So about current situation in the renewable sector, it develops fast, and as of today we have a system of state support for renewable energy, and we have a green tariff, and now there is discussion at the international level and in the country, there is a need to change this state support and to change the system that will envisage the bringing of maximum participants to the market, decrease of cost of kilowatt, and to increase competitiveness and to increase the quality of provision of production of renewable energy. So by the representatives of the Parliament, Lisetsky and Dobrovsky, developed a draft law that envisages the introduction of the new system of support for the renewable energy and the introduction of the auction system. Now we have public discussions, and there is a working group that works really great, participants of NGOs and other organizations in order to improve this draft law. So today we're going to present the opinion of the members of the European-Ukrainian Energy Agency, how they see the introduction of the system of auctions and the support of renewable energy sector in Ukraine, taking into account experience that they brought from abroad and also the use of best practices that there are in the world. So now I would like to give the floor to Magnus Lundin, head of the Council of at European-Ukrainian Energy Agency, and he is going to provide his expert opinion on this important topic.
First of all, I'd like to say that it's very nice to be back here at the Ukraine Crisis Media Center and have these discussions. I recall being here discussing about the possibility of introducing electrical vehicles to the Ukrainian market. And drawing to that discussion, I think it's extremely important to see now the further development of the renewable energy sector here in the country. I am a long-termer here in Ukraine since 2003. I've been working with wind power and solar power. And from a very, shall we say, small market, we are now seeing further and further investments in the renewables field. And the reason I would say that we are seeing more and more investments is that the legislation, the regulation is now functional in Ukraine. And I'm not going to say that this is due to the European-Ukrainian Energy Agency, but we have been here now for, I think soon 10 years, fighting for the good policy, which means policy to support the climate change effort that we are working on together. Renewable energy is not only good for the climate, but it also provides a lot of very good job opportunities here in Ukraine. I haven't seen any study about how many people that are actually employed in the renewable energy sector, but I would imagine by now that we are talking actually several thousands of people, and that means good job opportunities, well-paid jobs in a new business sector that was not here 10 years ago. And thereby we can actually see what good policy is able to create. Now, for this particular discussion, we are coming into the point about changing the support schemes for renewable energy, moving towards an auction system. And in terms of an auction system from the organization, we are very positive to this in order to make sure that the consumers are receiving the most competitive electricity prices, very important for residential consumers as well as industrial consumers. We hope that the auction system will continue to make good competitive prices, but we also have to be careful about that we are bringing in the necessary capital to the market. And I'm therefore very happy that we today have one of the main foreign investors in the solar market here, Magnus, and who will be able to tell us his views about the upcoming auction system. From our perspective, we really hope that the organizations involved, the Ministry of Energy, the committees, etc., the Parliament, will create legislation that is on the equal, putting everybody on an equal basis and moving away from what in the past have been corrupt systems and into systems where we can welcome foreign investors. But we will probably hear more about that from Magnus himself. So from our side, we really would like to see equal rights, equal opportunities in the new renewable energy market, and we of course love to see further reductions on the tariffs. Maybe Magnus will tell us a little bit about that. And in particular, we want to see more people employed in the renewable energy sector. So by this, I think I will just hand over back to you, Oleksandra.
Thank you, Mats, very much. And Magnus, are you ready?
Yes, it works here.
Yeah, please, could you share your vision about renewable energy support system in Ukraine?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me here. I think overall, following what Mats is saying, I think almost, I would say, 99 out of 100 times we agree on topics. So we are very unified in this, and we've had many good discussions. I think what I am observing as an international player, so Scatec Solar is among probably top 10 developers of solar projects around the world. We are in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And we are very often the first entry into the more challenging markets as normal practitioners view it. So in many ways, when we are now active in Ukraine, there are a lot of observers internationally watching how we are doing. Because if we manage to enter in a successful way in Ukraine, we will most likely have a lot of followers coming in. And also, hopefully, if the auction program will be set in a very well-structured, transparent way, it will also hopefully bring in even bigger players that can also contribute with very competitive levels of cost. So I think first point for me is what Mats is saying. I think the most important point for Ukraine in the current discussion is to make sure that there will be an equal playing field for national and international players. And if it will not be that way, the strategy will not likely be successful, because you will have a setup which favors national players, which will be affecting the end consumers finally. I think overall my observations of what I've seen so far is quite positive. I see competent people speaking with competent words, and they are seeking discussions and inputs to try to unify everyone to make this a successful entry into what will become a very important part for the Ukrainian energy strategy, which everyone knows is relevant for the overall political discussions for Ukraine. And so I'm very optimistic. I think that discussion in itself could benefit from more inputs from international players. I think so far for example, working groups, discussions are not having many international players at all contributing. We are trying to play a role as a contributor in this discussion, because we are active in many other markets where they have auction systems. So we can share our experience there, especially from South Africa, from Brazil, now we're in Argentina, Mexico, Asia and Egypt, for example. So,
Magnus, if I may ask you there, what is your direct experience with when you move away from the so-called feed-in tariffs that we have today in Ukraine and you move into an auction system? Is there a change in the market, or is it expanding, or is it staying on the same levels? What is your experience?
Yeah, I think this is a point where we and EBRD, who is our main partner in Ukraine, are very much agreeing, and that is, if you have a successful implementation of an auction scheme, it will de-risk the market. It will most likely lead to a more clear, structured market for internationals to enter. It will bring more competitive capital. It will in general lead to what is the main reason for the auction scheme, which is to improve conditions for end consumers in Ukraine. And
do you see any risks with the auction system and the current discussions that are ongoing here in Ukraine?
Well, yeah, I think there are points that could be further discussed, and I will aim to provide our viewpoints in that. There are a few points that I just mentioned, or I could mention just here. I would probably emphasize 3 points, I would say.
Okay.
I think, first of all, we have to make sure that the whole idea with an auction program is to let market forces push the prices. And if it is constructed mainly at political level without actually having inputs from market practitioners, it will not be really a market-driven auction scheme.
Does that mean that you expect that the politicians are having too great hopes of pushing down the tariffs too quickly, and by doing that, shall we say, harm the market that has already been built up? Or what do you think will be the outcome of the tariffs discussions?
Yeah, I think so. That's my impression, at least. And I think there are a few points that are easily misunderstood. First of all, so for example, for us, solar irradiation in Ukraine is the main driver of economics of projects.
You basically mean how much sun that you have.
Yes.
Isn't that equal over the whole country, or does it change?
Oh, it changes drastically.
Drastically?
Yes, absolutely.
So in Ukraine, that would mean like the Black Sea region would be the most sunny, I would imagine?
Absolutely.
And then when you get up further north, you don't have so much sun.
No.
So would that mean that you should actually build more in the south to get better radiation, or?
That's the main challenge as it is right now, because a project in the south will have much more better economics for an investor than in the north. That is one point I think is not well understood. There's a clear difference from the south, middle, and north of Ukraine. And the underlying challenge there is that that's why everyone has been drawing south, which is making less likelihood that you can connect these types of projects in the south.
When you say connect, that is connection to the electrical network that is already there, I would assume, right?
Correct, yeah.
And so if everybody goes south, it would be difficult because it wouldn't be enough points where you can actually connect.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't also, I guess, spread the production very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's mainly why we have been centered in Ukraine, because on one side you have the solar, basically the hours of solar per day or per year, which is driving a strategy. You would be driving south, but because the south is challenging in terms of connecting, because of competition and other things that come out of competition, we are more centered in Ukraine, in our Cherkasy effort, for example, because even with today's high tariff level, projects in north of Ukraine are not financially viable. And I think most practitioners at political level are not aware of that. They think that today's tariff level are extremely high, and if you go in, you will earn a lot of money. We will earn more money in other markets we are in compared to north of Ukraine. In the middle of Ukraine, it is quite comparable with some of the other markets we are in.
All right. One question I've been wondering about, solar power needs a lot of space. Are you taking away farming land, or what type of land can you use, or are you focusing on putting your solar panels on like buildings, or what is your strategy in this?
So 2 points. We only focus on land that is already used, meant to use for energy services or energy purposes, so not for farming. One of our most important parts as an international company in different markets is that we do not create harm to the environment, and that is a point that we emphasize a lot in every market. So if in any entry we do, we make sure that we enter in a way that is beneficial for the local environment. So we would only enter at land that has everything ready to construct solar plants, and that does not have any farming there.
So you mean that you're not going to like steal away farming land from the farmers in
Absolutely.
Kherson and Nikolaev
No.
and Odessa region?
No.
You only build on other sites that are not used for farming
Yeah.
activities.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this like social responsibility. Could you emphasize maybe a little bit more points about how you work when you come into a country in terms of what type of investigations are you doing and so on in terms of the social, environmental issues?
Yeah. One of our big success was when we entered into the first auction rounds in South Africa back in 2011. We were the first main entry into this program, and we built about 225 megawatts there.
225 megawatts, what is that in terms of like, how much land are we talking about? It's a couple of hectares? Or?
No, 500 hectares more or less. Today it would be around 250 million euro investment.
That's what you have done in South Africa alone?
Yes.
And then you have other countries that you're also investing in. What is your plan for Ukraine if you're, so to say, getting all your projects up and running and so on, and the auction system is working? What is the investment volume that you are planning here approximately?
Yeah.
If I may say.
Yeah, and just first back to your first question about corporate social responsibility. In South Africa, we actually engaged, even though nobody believed it was possible, we engaged more or less only local workforce. We brought our skill set as an overarching management for the project, but we used more or less only local workforce, and we did it in the timeline that we were being challenged on by other practitioners. So we are quite experienced taking into account and bringing in the local communities, and we also have certain fundings for the local environments when we are able to implement projects successfully. So that's to the community focus. In terms of portfolio in Ukraine, we have an ambition, as we have communicated, to install at least, hopefully, around 200 megawatts by the end of next year. It is a challenging market, and we are every day we are facing new challenges. So there's a reason why you don't see that our typical competitors, they are not here, and there's a reason for it. It is a challenging market to enter. I hope that we will be able to implement the projects in a successful way, so that we can set a first foothold to be able to build even further projects in the next auction rounds, subject to a program that actually works to the benefit of international players. But we do indeed have large ambitions, large hopes. We know that we can provide very competitive terms. We are doing so in many other markets. So I think in essence, it's obviously a big benefit for the market to have a player like Scatec with Scandinavian values to it, and with the right mindset to come in here and shape the market. And as mentioned before, if we are successful to enter, we will bring in more international players that will bring more competition and will make it better for end consumers.
I have heard that one of the thoughts have been to have a pilot project, a pilot auction, as the first step of this new auction scheme that is being discussed. And the discussion is that to use the area around the old Chernobyl nuclear power plant. What is your view about the selection of this area as a pilot for the auction? Is it the right selection, or what's your view about it?
Well, I understand the rationale behind it. It's a great story, obviously. It seems to me to be mainly driven from a top-down approach, a political discussion, rather than what the market players believe is a reasonable first project to include in the auction program. The main reason why I'm saying that is because it is situated in the north of Ukraine, which has not that much sun. So ideally, you should have projects at least where it's a bit more sunny.
So you mean that even though that I would assume that there is an electrical interconnection point up in Chernobyl which is not used at the moment from the old power plant, it's just not sunny up there, right?
Correct, less sunny, yeah.
All right, and that's probably why, yeah, all right. So that means that it's not really the ideal place for a solar power plant.
I think one of the main biggest risks that I see for a successful implementation of the auction program is that on one side you want to lower the cost, the tariff, and on the other side you want to implement a project which is not well positioned to bring down a lower tariff. And if the big risk I'm saying here is that if you in the first auction program, as it is being discussed in the first pilot, you want to use this land, if you put a ceiling on the tariff price below what we have today, there is a risk that nobody will bid for that project because it doesn't provide financial return as you would need in this market, which does indeed have a lot of risk to it.
Would that mean that the project may, the auction may, well, maybe somebody is winning the project, but nobody can actually build the project because it's just not economically viable when you start talking to international lenders and so on?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, another very important point that I wish to raise, and I have raised, and that is we have seen very successful and very unsuccessful auction programs. And very often the successful programs, they are run together with market players, and they have a high entry ticket, which means that if you bid for a certain amount of, say, a project, you need to make sure that you can actually finance and build it. And what is the main discussion here, for example, is how much cash or a letter of credit do you have to provide when you apply or you want to get the project. This starts getting a bit complicated, but the main point is that we have markets such as Mexico, Turkey, etc., where the prices came down too much because you had a lot of bidders and they won the auction because they had the lowest bid, but they cannot finance it. So the project never happens.
You mean basically like trading companies that are just buying a license, so to say, and then they sit on this license for years and years, nothing comes out of it?
Yes, exactly. And on the flip side, you have other successful auction programs like, for example, South Africa, or in Argentina, where we are now as well, where you see if you have a structure where you filter out the unserious players, you will have realization immediately of projects, and you have a very competitive market that develops very quickly.
I see. So I think what you're saying here in Ukraine is that you would like to see an auction system where there are serious players that have a lot of capital that can be employed very quickly, and instead of having some smart Ukrainian businessmen running around and bidding and start trading with each other these licenses. I think that makes a lot of sense from a general policy that the energy market is really too important to be left to small players that are not really seeing the big picture.
Mm. And I think also a lot of that's what's moving as what I see in Ukraine. There are a lot of developers, there are few investors, and every developer think that their project is very valuable. But
I was just about to say that everybody we talk to, they all believe that it's a seller's market.
yeah.
Are you having difficulties finding projects?
No, it's very much of a buyer's market. We have had, I think, probably more than 50 people coming to us, and you're not able to address even 10% of that. So, and these are players that come back again and again because there are no other buyers. And my assumption is that if I would be a developer now, I would make sure to find an investor very soon. If not, that project will not likely be of any value because you will have the auction program coming in as a new system, and therefore the old system will not really operate anymore.
Yeah, I could see that happening. How, in terms of you were talking about your intention of doing almost as much in Ukraine as in South Africa. How many people do you think that you would be employing when you are up and running, so to say, in terms of the service staff and staffing that you would have to have here in Ukraine? Or are we talking a couple of hundreds of people or something like that? Or?
Yeah, especially during construction, there will be a large workforce needed. And as I mentioned before, our main ambition is always to source workforce locally. And that's our ambition in Ukraine as well. And then while these projects are getting operational, there will also be need for staffing, for resources. And also there will be, of course, tax revenues for the local municipalities on the operations. So.
All right, so this is actually something that will benefit also the local community in terms of jobs and other side activities, I would assume, where there are more and more things happening, and no farming land will be used for it, so it's like really just land that is not really at the moment useful for the communities. I mean, I would imagine that most of the municipalities and so on that you meet with there, they would be quite positive to this.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very positive. And I think especially when they understand our mindset when we come in, I think that's maybe part of the Scandinavian mindset, but we are quite cautious when we enter into new markets. We take into account a lot of the viewpoints from the local market so that we are able to cooperate together in a very good way.
And that means you were talking about this with social responsibility and environmental issues, that when you come into an area, you just don't go in and start building it, but you have community relationship management and so on as part of your normal business activity.
Yes.
And it must be quite different from, shall we say, the old Ukrainian way that here we decide that it's going to be a nuclear power plant and you just have to move out and give space for it.
Yeah, I will not probably make any assumptions on how things have been, but I think to install a project in Ukraine now, you have to comply with a lot of regulations, a lot of laws, a lot of different entities that take care of the local environments as well, so that the whole process also safeguards the local communities in addition as well. But then we, as an international player, we have an additional layer of, call it, ethical mindsets, while also working with parties like EBRD, who has also very high standards for not interfering and to provide only benefit to the environment, so that in general we not only have to comply with the local market standards, but we add another layer of standards as well, which we hope will contribute, or at least what we've seen in other markets, that when we come into a market like Ukraine, we contribute with lifting the standards of how things are being done in the markets. So that could be a benefit for Ukraine renewable energy market as well.
So in other words, if the auction system is targeted the right way, there will be more investments from Scatec and most likely also for other foreign investors. There will be further job opportunities and so on. I don't know, Oleksandra, we have been talking, Magnus and I, quite a bit here. You may also have some further questions about this particular topic.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, as I understood, we have not much time left, but I would like to ask you gentlemen also about elements of the design of auction, like as I participate in these working groups in the parliament discussions concerning the new draft law on the auction system, and there are a few things that are very much discussed, as for example, what are the business entities, what are the power plants have to participate in auction system, which megawatt capacity should they have to participate in auctions?
So the question is what we think are the relevant sizes to be in the auction program. Well, I think what is a bit the challenge, well, normally you would like big size projects because the intention of an auction program is to drive down the prices, right? And so because of that, you would normally like to have big size projects. That's what we do in most of our markets. They are on average between 50 to 100 megawatts per project. The challenge in Ukraine, of course, is grid capacity and also in some cases land availability, because it needs to be land made for energy purposes. So the minimum size, I would say, I don't have a very strong opinion, although I have to say that if the intention is to have economics of scale, to have lower cost of capital, to get lower cost for the end consumer, then you should aim to have larger projects. If you would aim to include, for example, 1 megawatt project in the auction program, I think it will go against the ambition, which is to, in the end, get lower prices. So I would say what is mentioned today is 10 megawatts per solar project. Just to put it in perspective, Scatec is a company that still doesn't have the lowest cost of capital among international players. So international players will normally go into projects where it's a size of, say, 200 to 400 megawatts. We normally do, say, 50 to 200 megawatts. And so the question can be, who will come and bid for projects that are 10 and 15 megawatts? It will not be the players with the low-cost capital. It will be more medium-sized, likely a lot of local players. And I think if the intention is to have a market for these players in Ukraine, that's good. It brings more competition, but it will not bring the lowest cost for a project. On the other side, if you would be able to have large projects, you would have more economics of scale and lower cost of capital.
Okay, thank you. And great. I think more inputs from you as our member and our members other in this renewable energy sector will also send us their suggestions in the auction system design. So participating in all these working groups in Parliament, we will present all visions of our members to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mats.